So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Exporting Services, the VAT Implications. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Haines White, and I am Head of International Trade at the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. We are the accredited Chamber of Commerce for Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire, Heathrow, and Swindon. We are accredited Chamber of Commerce, and we offer a wide range of services from representational to events to lobbying and also international trade. So international trade is one of our key focuses, and we have a strong team of 18 members of staff who deal with all aspects of trading internationally, from market promotion to trade facilitation. So that involves getting goods, services to market, looking into new potential markets to import, and also we cover export as well. So we do both ends of the scale, importing and exporting and everything that surrounds that. So if you have any inquiries in relation to anything trading globally, we'd be happy to assist you. And we obviously work with partners like Haines Watts, who are specialists in particular fields. So just a couple of housekeeping things this morning. The session is being recorded and it will be available to review on our thamesvalley.co.uk website probably later today, if not tomorrow. If you wish to raise any questions, please do so using either the Q&A facility or the chat function. We do have some pre-questions, so we'll cover some of those later after Steve's session. So the webinar today, so obviously the UK has now left the EU, and it's led to a wide range of changes in the way UK businesses trade with the rest of the world, and specifically with the EU. Whether your business is involved in buying or selling services between the UK, the EU and the rest of the world, it's important to keep up to date with these changes. With the UK being the second largest exporter of services in the world, VAT on exporting of services is one of the most important topics for UK businesses, and still raises questions, even though Brexit is a reality and we've been out of Europe for over a year now. There are still a lot of issues, a lot of things that are being resolved, and a lot of things that companies are working for. So this webinar will look at these changes and give the options for traders to manage VAT arrangements and liabilities. So I'll introduce you to our speaker today, our expert speaker, Steve McCrindle. Steve McCrindle is a VAT partner at Haines Watts, and he actually covers the London and the N25 region. He's worked there for nearly 11 years. Prior to this, he was a director at EY and a partner at RSM. He's also the global chair of indirect taxes at the Geneva Group International, the 7th largest alliance network of accounting firms globally. Through his team of UK experts, and they deal with VAT, international trade and customs inquiries. And through his position at GGI, he has a global team of approximately 160 indirect tax consultants situated in most of the countries that are members of that group, in over 125 different countries. So a huge reach there, and access to the various other markets, which is good to know. Steve has started communicating with clients and his team colleagues on the potential consequences of Brexit. I'll have to put a pound in the box now for using the B word. Early in 2018, assisting companies with VAT and customs advisory requirements, and providing comfort where companies had doubts, providing bespoke solutions. His team continue to this day, and we were discussing earlier, to work on Brexit related issues. And we know it is still of some issues, and with everything going on with the Northern Ireland Protocol at the moment, we may envisage some other changes coming forward. So I'd like to welcome Steve and hand over to him for the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, as Anne's mentioned, I'm a VAT partner. That's my specialism, but within my team we also have a customs and international trade expert, so we don't just do VAT. And nothing else to say on that, apart from next slide, please. Right. Anne mentioned the B word, the Brexit word. It's been a massive issue for people trading goods cross-border. She said it's still continuing to this day. I've got new clients coming to me all the time with issues. They can be overseas businesses wanting to send goods into the UK, or UK businesses wishing to send goods into the EU, and on it goes, not non-stop. I don't expect it to finish anytime soon. The good news is, against that backdrop, the VAT rules on services, as a consequence of Brexit, have not changed very much at all. And in some instances, have got a lot easier for businesses. I thought what would be useful as a starting point is just to run through some of the basics, the basic principles of VAT when it comes to trading in services, and then look at some of the exceptions and finish off where they interact with goods, because I think we're going to get a lot of questions about services that are provided with goods or separate to goods, but nevertheless there is a supply of goods somewhere in the chain. So that's the sort of agenda I have, and I won't labour. I'll just get on with the presentation. For exporting services, there is a general rule, as I've mentioned, and exceptions to that general rule. But the general rule is different on B2B and B2C services. The B2B general rule for services is that they are taxable where the customer belongs. So if your customer belongs in a country outside the UK and Isle of Man, and when I refer to the UK going forward, I mean also the Isle of Man. So where your customer is outside the UK, you do not charge VAT under the general rule. The obligation is placed on your customer to self-account for VAT in their own jurisdiction, in their own country. So if the supplier and the customer both belong in the UK supplier accounts for VAT on the supply to the UK customer. If the supplier belongs in the UK and the customer is outside the UK, the supply will be outside the scope of UK VAT. It's not zero rated, it's not exempt, it is outside the scope of UK VAT. All that means in layman's terms is you don't have to charge VAT on the supply to your customer situated outside the UK. What you must do, though, if you're making such a supply to customers outside the UK, is retain evidence that the customer is overseas and is in business. That's for B2B supplies, okay? Because if there's no evidence that your customer is overseas and is in business, Revenue and Customs will treat it as a B2C supply and may demand that it is subject to UK VAT. So that's a very important point about evidence of where your customer belongs and whether it's in business. Conversely, the B2C general rule is that it is taxable where the supplier belongs. B2B, it's where the customer belongs. B2C, it's where the supplier belongs. So ostensibly, if you're making a supply from the UK to someone anywhere else in the world, the supply is taxable in the UK. All of these rules are general rules, but there are exceptions to the general rules, and we're now going to flick through those exceptions, or some of those exceptions anyway. Next slide, please. Just before we move on, though, businesses don't only have one establishment, so one headquarters or one office or one factory, and they may not indeed be in one country, they may be in many countries. So when you look at who you're making your supply to and where they belong, it is the establishment of theirs that's most closely connected with the supply that you make your supply of services to. And that would usually be, in practical terms, that would usually be the establishment that you have your contract with. So if you're dealing with a French company, but it was their branch in Italy that signed the contract, your service is being supplied to the branch in Italy that signed the contract, because they're the ones most closely connected with the supply. And that will be even more so the case if you are dealing directly with the people in Italy and making your supply of services to the people in Italy. That's more difficult to determine where private individuals are concerned, because they don't have business establishments. So in a B2C scenario, a private individual, it is usually the place of residence that determines the place of supply, or where they are resident when they receive that supply. That needs some thinking about sometimes, and it's not always obvious, but it's something you should bear in mind. Next slide, please. So the exceptions to the general rule are connected with all of those areas that are listed here. Land-related services, see this all the time. Hire of means of transport, services which includes admission, where you have artistic performance, cultural performances, education, training. You know, people do exchanges from the UK to the States. Chinese students coming to the UK. It all gets very complex. There are conferences, exhibitions, etc. Ancillary transport services and valuation and work on goods. I come back to that work on goods later. Okay. Restaurant and catering services. This one is logical because the restaurant will be situated in a particular country. Passenger and freight transport, intermediary services. Again, I come to this section under goods, because the rules for goods are different to those for services, but you can provide an intermediary service between two parties supplying goods from one to the other. So that has an interesting quirk in it. B2B supplies of certain services supplied where the customer belongs outside the UK. I'll come back to that later. Use and enjoyment rules, which I don't intend to go into at all, because they are very complicated and they are different from country to country anyway. And B2C supplies of digital services. This was introduced from the 1st of January 2015. I don't intend to go into that either. Next slide, please. So, exceptions to the general rule. Land-related services. Now, land-related services are only those services directly related to the land. And Revenue and Customs say that this rule applies only to services which relate directly to a specific site of land or buildings. That is, those services derived from land and where the land is central and essential part of the service, or where the service is intended to legally or physically alter a property. Okay, well, that is actually quite a good summary of what it means, that the service is specific to a site and that it changes the physicality or the the legal ownership of the property. An example, or an easy example here, is architectural services relating to a specific site. So you are providing an architectural service to a customer situated in Italy, but the site is in France. The land-related service is provided in France because that's where the specific site is. Okay, and you are then also subject to the French VAT regime. There might be a French VAT obligation there because the service is supplied in France. Not included would be architectural services relating to a design concept. So if an architect designs, this is what McDonald's outlets are going to look like everywhere. We have them all over the world, and it is a concept. So it's about a chain, and it's not about a specific site in a specific country. Then that is not a land-related service. That is a general rule service. Yes. Next slide, please. Another exception: work carried out on goods. This is essentially a physical service carried out on another person's goods. In this case, this exception only applies to B2C services as well. So where you physically carry out a service on another person's goods, B2C, and examples would include processing, manufacturing or assembling, repairs, cleaning or restorations, alterations, calibrations, etc., etc. Not included, so that's work on goods. You can actually see somebody physically working on those goods. Not included are things like inspection for valuation, testing and analysis, valuation. You can see that those are not actually physical work on the goods. That's more service oriented. For B2B supplies of such services, the B2B general rule applies. Next slide, please. And another one I mentioned I would talk about later is intermediary services. And this only applies B2C as well. So the B2C supply of intermediary service is where the place of supply is where the underlying arranged supply is made. So for example, and this would include facilitation, not just brokering. For example, if you arrange services connected to land, the place of your service will be where the land is situated, yes? So it would have to be with a specific site, but the place of supply would be where that site was situated. And for B2B supplies of such services, the B2B general rule applies. Yeah. Now there's another section on this to do with zero rating of these type of services where it is connected with goods as well, but it doesn't cover facilitation. It only covers the arrangement. This particular exception here for B2C services covers only the arrangement. It doesn't cover facilitation. Next slide, please. So these are B2C services of professional, technical, intellectual type services. And these have always been things like consulting services, advertising services, copyright, patents, licenses, etc., etc. The list goes on. I won't run through the list, but such supplies of these services prior to Brexit, these services provided to customers B2C in the EU would have been subject to UK VAT. They are no longer, since we left the EU effective 1st of January 2021, they are no longer subject to UK VAT. They are outside the scope of UK VAT. So this is actually a benefit of Brexit. Next slide, please. Yeah, the last note there is the all-important one here is that it is the nature of the service that you should consider, and not the professional qualifications somebody carries. I have colleagues that are qualified in many things other than accounting, but they still work in the accountancy profession. So look at the nature of the supply that you are making or receiving, rather than the qualifications of the person or the organisation providing it. Next slide, please. Regardless of where your customer belongs, where the place of supply of your service is the UK, you should charge an account for UK VAT. But as I mentioned earlier, this will only normally apply to some B2C services, unless there is an exception to the general rule for B2C services. And I've mentioned a few of those going through the exceptions before. Where the place of supply of your service is where your customer belongs, you should consider if you have an obligation to register for VAT in that country. VAT in some parts of the world is called GST, HST, HSTs in Canada, or sales tax, typically the United States of America, but they're called other things in different parts of the world. So it's the equivalent of VAT. Always check to see whether you've got an obligation. You might be able to treat your UK suppliers outside the scope of UK VAT, but what's the implication in the country where the service is being provided? You may have to register for VAT and charge an account for VAT there. Next slide, please. And this is what I was talking about earlier on. There are, rather than services being outside the scope of UK VAT, some of them can be zero rated. So a taxable supply, but at the zero rate when supplied in the UK. And that's the important part. They are supplied in the UK. And the three areas are intermediary services, training performed for overseas governments, and work on goods for export. Starting with intermediary services, the making of arrangements for, not facilitation, remember, this is just the making of arrangements for the export of any goods, a supply of services which itself is zero rated as work on goods for export, any supply of services which are made outside the UK can be zero rated. I've mentioned the note at the bottom already. So next slide, please. Training provided for overseas governments. I mention this because I'm sure there'll be somebody on this webinar that is actually involved in this provision of services. But the training supplied to overseas, supplied in the UK again, to overseas governments for the purpose of their sovereign activities, and this means not their business activities, this means their statutory or sovereign activities, that is already not exempt from UK VAT. So example, education, vocational training, is zero rated, and it's zero rated only if a statement in writing from that government or its accredited representative that the trainees are employed in furtherance of its sovereign activities is obtained and retained. So zero rating won't apply unless that statement is obtained and retained, and it should be retained for at least 6 years. This zero rating is only rather available as a concession. It isn't part of UK legislation, it is a concession, and it's an extra statutory concession, 3.17, if anyone's interested. Next slide, please. Work on goods for export. Zero rating applies provided that the following conditions are met. These goods must be in the UK, okay? It's always in the UK before zero rating can apply. The goods on which the work is to be carried out must have been obtained, acquired within, or imported into the UK for the purposes of being worked on. The goods must not be used in the UK between the time of leaving the supplier's premises and being exported out of the UK. So that just confirms point one, is that they're here to be worked on, not to be used in making supplies. On completion of the works, the goods have to be intended and in fact are exported either by the supplier of the service or someone acting on their behalf, which could be the freight carrier or a customs agent, the customer itself, or someone acting on their behalf, again, the freight carrier or a customs agent. And that's if but only if the customer belongs outside the UK will zero rating apply there. And as always, satisfactory evidence of export of goods must be obtained and retained. Revenue and Customs will not accept zero rating if there is no evidence of the export of the goods. Next slide, please. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. I would just like to add on the back of that, that there are instances where goods are provided with services. For instance, somebody let's use an example. Somebody in the UK sends or sells, supplies a big machine that is exported to another country. Let's use Germany as an example. And because those goods have left the UK, providing evidence of export is obtained and retained, that supply should be capable of zero rating from a VAT perspective. But that supply of machinery may also have attaching to it an obligation to carry out training, a warranty, where if something goes wrong within the first 6 months or whatever, the machine is maintained at the expense of the seller of the machine. And the question then is, well, what's going on here? We're supplying goods, but we're also supplying services. So what's the goods are zero rated. What's the VAT liability of the service? Well, to my mind, it is always the contract that dictates how that service should be treated. And if we look at the legal aspect of this, that if somebody signs a contract saying we're going to sell you a machine for £500,000 and we'll throw in the training and the 6-month warranty as part of that, and the value of that training and the warranty is negligible, it's insignificant, and it's done under one contract for the supply of goods, then you consider that there is a composite supply. Yes, the composite supplies of goods and ancillary services, and the liability of those services would then normally follow the zero rating of the goods, and especially where there isn't a price stated for those services. It's just all thrown in with the goods. If, however, somebody says, well, I'm going to sell you the goods for £500,000, maybe with a slight discount. Let's call it £450,000. And we will contract separately with you to provide the training and a warranty, and maybe some sort of service contract, annual refreshers on training for new staff of the recipient of the goods. Then you could probably see, well, there's two separate supplies here. There's two contracts, and one is clearly for goods and one is clearly for services. And where that's the case, the supply of the goods would be zero rated, but the supply of the services under a separate contract being supplied separately for a separate price would have a different VAT liability. And then you would go back to what we've discussed earlier. Are these a general rule service? Are they being provided B2B or B2C? And if they are one of those services, are they an exception? Is there some way we can find an exception for that? And that will dictate how you decide what the VAT liability of the supply of your service is. It is likely that they won't be subject to UK VAT if it's for all done in a jurisdiction outside the UK. So if the training's done in Germany, if the warranty work, service work, etc. is carried out in Germany, it suggests it's not being done in the UK. But there again, it could be, so that suggests outside the scope treatment, but it could be there's an obligation to register for VAT in Germany. So you always need to check the rules in the customer's country before satisfying yourselves that you're off the hook from a VAT point of view. In most circumstances, when you supply services business to business, especially if they're general rule services provided B2B, it is normally the recipient of the service that has to account for the VAT on the imported service. And that's under a mechanism called the reverse charge, which some of you, and hopefully most of you, will have heard of. But it's not your problem, it's the problem for the customer. But you should always, from a prudent position, making sure that you have got your VAT position correct with all jurisdictions you're involved in. You should always check with your advisors. I think that's where I'd like to stop there. Hopefully I've explained most things adequately for you, but if not, I'm here to answer questions.
So, right, thank you, Steve. As comprehensive as ever, I would say, and you know, it's not. Now you know why there's so many people that are specialists in VAT. It's quite a daunting topic for a non-VAT person like myself. So we've had some questions come in, and one of them is a company, they use outward processing to get generators repaired in Holland. They are responsible for all the Incoterms, but when they arrive back in the UK, they plan to use postponed VAT accounting for the cost of the repair service. Is this correct, or should they not?
So the goods are going out temporarily. So the UK goods being sent out temporarily for
repair.
A repair and then brought back to the UK.
Yeah.
I would have thought PVA can be used, but if they're not goods of UK or EU origin, there might be a customs duty implication.
I think under the process, in theory, that it's a simplified, it's a special procedure. So as long as they can prove that it's for repair, etc. But I think they're just worried about whether they should use PVA or not, postpone VAT accounting. But
from a customs point of view, postpone VAT accounting would work from a VAT point of view. I don't think you want to get into having to defray VAT to Revenue and Customs and claim it back, because they get very upset about that. But PVA is just adjustments on your VAT return. I would have thought returned goods relief was possibly a better way of doing it. because it also protects you from a customs point of view, from a customs duty point of view. But you would need to take advice on how that worked. With PVA, I don't know if anybody's using postponed VAT accounting or trying to use it. It's one of the things that's exercising our clients the most, even though we've been around them all and mentioned it and tried to get them to listen to what they were being told. They're still getting it wrong, and it's not our client's fault. Usually it's the freight carrier's fault or the customs agent's fault. Most customs agents, fine, some not. Carriers more often are getting this wrong because it's easier not to have to think about it. If they can defer VAT on your account or their account, they'll do it because it's easier. Postponed VAT accounting needs particular things to be done. It needs your business to be named as the consignee at your address as well. It needs your VAT registration number and your GB EORI number on the C88 SAD document, the import declaration. And it needs certain boxes ticking and annotating correctly within the C88 as well. And if all those component parts aren't there, the default position is Revenue and Customs charge you import VAT, and then you could get into a punch-up with Revenue and Customs over whether that's recoverable or not. So if you're going to use PVA, my advice is ensure every time that you have an importation coming into you in the UK under PVA, ensure that your freight carrier or customs agent, whoever's making the import entry for you, has a written, could be email, but a written instruction that PVA must be used. Yeah, because it can only be claimed on each individual entry. There isn't an application or a registration or enrollment. It is claimed on each import entry. Make sure your carrier has a written instruction from you that it must use PVA, and give it your name, address, UK VAT registration number, and GB EORI number as well with that instruction.
I can concur on that. Our chamber is a customs broker, we will not do anything unless we have it in writing from the client on the instructions in regards to PVA. So it is very important. So we have another question come in. What is the situation regarding B2B supply of IT cloud-based software as a service capabilities, so SaaS capabilities, from UK to an EU or USA business client? Are these classes digital services or not, i.e. digital service B2C only?
I thought we started off that question with B2B. B2B.
So it did start off with B2B. I'm just reading it out.
I've just got confused.
So situation regarding B2B supply of IT-based SaaS capabilities from US to an EU, or sorry, from a UK to an EU or US business. Is this classed as a digital service or not?
It probably is, but shouldn't matter because the supply would be outside the scope of UK VAT. And it would be with EU customers, it would be the EU customer would have to reverse charge that supply. So they would have to basically self-charge themselves VAT. If it was a B2C supply, then it might obligate you to register for VAT in your customer's country. If you've got more than one EU customer, the backstop is that you'd have to register for VAT in each EU member state in which you have a customer that you're supplying B2C, but there is something called a one-stop shop or OS for such services where you can, which I believe was introduced by the EU on the 1st of July last year, where you can register for VAT in one EU member state and declare your VAT for all member states on that one VAT return.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So we've had a couple of people ask about declaration on their VAT return for anything that's going out post-Brexit, sale of services. Do they need to go, where do they go on their VAT return?
Well, not in box 8 and 9. Box 8 and 9. Box 8 and 9 are value boxes, but they're for goods and related services supplied to the EU. The only reason those boxes still exist on the VAT return is because of the Northern Ireland Protocol and Northern Ireland's position as being partly in the UK and partly in the EU. But for that, those boxes would have disappeared off the VAT return. So if you are trading from anywhere other than Northern Ireland, or you're not trading with Northern Ireland, you're just trading with the remaining 27 EU member states, there is no need for you to put a supply of services into box 8 and 9 of your VAT return. The reason I'm rambling about that is it's the most common mistake made on VAT returns. So no box 8 and 9 if all you're supplying is services to EU customers. So the value of your supplies all go in box 6. So that's supplies you make, your outputs, your sales, and the goods and services you receive in box 7. That's the value boxes. The VAT goes in box 1 and accumulates into box 3, and box 4 for input tax, and box 5 the net tax.
And then following on from the VAT return, we've also had people asking where they are interest stats still being used or not?
Well, again, if you've got anything to do with Northern Ireland, yes. If you haven't, no. You shouldn't have to complete. Was this interest stat or EC sales list? Sorry.
Interest stat.
Yeah. For interest stat, there was in 2021, there was an obligation to complete interest stat, but I think that obligation's gone now. I would need to confirm that, actually.
Okay, so yeah, that would be much appreciated if you could.
I actually haven't had that question since 2021, so I haven't even thought about it.
No, I don't think they do, but you never know now. So
yeah,
we'll come back on that one. I think
got me thinking. There was an obligation to complete. There was an obligation for purchases, not for sales.
Yes.
In 2021, but I think it's gone. But I need to check and confirm. EC sales lists, no. It's only if you're caught by the Northern Ireland Protocol that those things might apply generally to you.
Fantastic. So obviously you spoke about, we had a number of clients who obviously had they're selling maintenance as a separate issue to the original contract, so that you've covered that, so that's answered a lot of those questions, which is superb. And we just have another question about the IT SaaS services. If they procure IT SaaS services from an EU supplier and then sell these services with the additional value added to a non-UK B2B client, what rule would apply with regards to the VAT that they're selling?
I'm just writing this down.
Yep.
Was the last part of that non-UK, non-EU?
Yes, non-UK, B2B.
Okay, so you're procuring the SaaS capability from the EU, you add some value to it and you sell it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, still outside, it's B2B, it's still outside the scope of UK VAT. And it's your customer's responsibility to get the VAT right on that. Now, I'm talking here UK, EU. I'd know, for example, that from the 1st of April, Thailand has introduced new rules, not Thailand, sorry, Vietnam has introduced new rules for digital services. They might not be on all fours with the UK and the EU. And I know that India is about to introduce new rules on this, which may not be on all fours with the UK and the EU. So I would say that it's always, you should always check what the situation is in your customer's country. I can tell you that something is not subject to UK VAT or is subject to UK VAT. I am not an expert on Vietnamese VAT, nor on an Indian GST that hasn't yet been introduced. So things change continuously. If you're moving outside of the UK, your customers are outside the UK and EU, definitely if outside that area, I would go and check. Get your advisor to check. And if your advisor hasn't got that capability, then I'm happy to help because I have got that capability through my roles with Haines Watts and with Geneva Group International.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, vitally important that businesses on all aspects do their due diligence, and because every country is different. Every country, there might be similarities, but there's also the oddity that's thrown in. So very good advice there, Steve. So I'm just going to thank you, Steve. As I said, covered a lot of things again. We've answered a lot of the questions. Any that we don't have, obviously, we'll come back and answer after the event. And I'm just going to cover a couple of things with regards to what's happening in the chamber. So thank you again, Steve, as good as ever.
You're welcome.
I just want to announce again that the chamber actually provides a customs advice and support helpline. You can look at various packages. You don't need to be a member. You don't need to do anything else. We have a team of qualified customs specialists who will happily answer your inquiries, and where it relates to a subject just as VAT, we'll obviously then refer on to Steve because it's not our specialism. But do have a look at that. The information is on our website, or if you become one of our global members, you do get a percentage of consultancy for free. So that's just something to think about. Next slide, please, Malin. Just a couple of events we have coming up. On the 26th of May, we have how to select the right international markets for your business. So I know you guys are involved in VAT, but please forward to our colleagues, your colleagues who are responsible for business development, because that's always a good webinar and very interesting to see how the various tools you can use, as well as obviously paying for consultancy. There are some ways you can do that to start a bit of investigation and research yourselves. And also then the VCC's National Global Annual Conference, which is on 30th of June. A little dicky bird tells me that we might have the Chancellor there unless something really urgent crops up. So that could be an interesting bit of debate that goes on at that event. So thank you, Malin. Next slide.
Anne, I've got an answer on Intrastat.
Oh, fantastic.
From the 1st of January 2022, Intrastat will only apply for movements of goods between Northern Ireland and the European Union. Movements between Great Britain and the EU will no longer be covered by Intrastat. That's from officially notified by HM Revenue and Customs.
Fantastic, and that confirms what you thought anyway. So, so that's always very, very good. So, I'd like to again thank Steve for today, always full of such knowledge and information. As I said, the webinar will be recorded and made available, but please do contact us if you have any queries or you'd like to, again, and what we will do as well is send out a copy of the slides to everybody, and also a link to the recording. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and see you soon. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Anne.